Welcome to the Art of Us podcast, Bridging the Gender Divide Series, Episode 2. To be wed or not to be? That is the question. Based on the book by Xavier Ezra Borrero, a book that's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
And welcome! Yes, this deep dive using Xavier Ezra Borrero's book is going to take us on quite a journey. We're looking at marriage, something so, fundamental.
Right.
But we're going to dig into some pretty surprising truths about where it came from and how much its whole purpose has changed over time.
Absolutely, because you think marriage today, and immediately, romance comes to mind, maybe commitment, the whole happily ever after thing we see everywhere.
Sure, that's the modern image.
But this book, it really challenges that.
Yeah.
It pushes us to look past the picture we have now.
Yeah.
We're going to see how this thing that feels so, fixed.
It's fable.
It's actually been incredibly fluid. I mean, changing from ancient, almost transactional deals all the way to how people navigate it now with social media and everything. It's really a look at what we think marriage is versus, what it actually was and what it's becoming.
It really does turn some common ideas upside down. So the big question the book tackles first is, what was marriage originally for?
Yeah, was it always about finding your soulmate, that big romantic love story?
That's the narrative, right? The movies, the songs.
But the book says, not quite.
Not quite is putting it mildly. Miles away from it, actually. According to the insights from this source, marriage didn't kick off with love poems and longing looks.
Okay, so what then?
It started with practicality. More specifically, often livestock and business deals.
Livestock? Seriously? So less Romeo and Juliet, more counting cows.
Pretty much. The book lays it out in ancient societies, Mesopotamia, Egypt, ancient Rome. Marriage was primarily a contract.
A contract between who?
Between families.
Yeah.
The main goals were things like consolidating wealth, building up political alliances, and, this was crucial, managing property and making sure you had legitimate heirs.
Wow. So way less about how two individuals felt about each other.
No, much less.
And way more about the family standing, power, survival, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the women involved. Often they were, let's say, key components in these negotiations. The book describes them as sometimes being viewed almost like, valuable assets, part of the deal.
Part of the transaction to seal the deal between families.
Right. The book even brings up this Roman term, connubium. Sounds fancy, doesn't it?
A little.
But it was basically just the legal right to marry someone in a way that produced legitimate heirs, kids who could legally inherit property, status. It was all about social structure, legal lines.
So the foundation wasn't necessarily shared feelings, but more like shared interests, assets, strategy.
Shared assets, political gain, keeping the family line going, totally different from the fairy tale version.
Did love ever factor in?
Yeah.
Or was it just completely absent?
Well, the book doesn't say it never happened. Personal affection might grow later, sure, or it might not. But the key point is, it wasn't the reason for the marriage. It wasn't the requirement.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's where the book, for me, got really interesting. It connects that history right to today.
How so?
By pointing out something about arranged marriages. Even now, in places like India or Japan, where arranged marriages still happen.
Right, where they often prioritize things like compatibility, family background, practicality.
Exactly. Not necessarily that intense initial spark.
Yeah.
And the book says those marriages, they often report lower divorce rates.
Lower than Western marriages that are built almost entirely on finding and keeping that romantic in-love feeling.
Yeah, that statistic really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It just challenges that whole love conquers all narrative we get fed constantly.
Right.
The book kind of suggests that maybe, just maybe, a foundation built on, let's say, practical partnership and shared goals, where love perhaps grows within that structure.
And sometimes be stronger, more durable.
Potentially, yes. Stronger than one that relies only on those, very powerful but sometimes quite fleeting initial emotions.
It really flips the script on how we define a successful marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it started as business and alliances, how on earth did we get to the romantic ideal that's so dominant now?
Well, the book points to a couple of really big shifts. First up, religion.
Ah, okay. How did that change things?
With Christianity gaining influence, that legal contract started to get, spiritualized. Marriage wasn't just a deal anymore. It was reframed as a sacrament, a holy union blessed by God.
So moving from contract to covenant.
Exactly that word, covenant. The book mentions that powerful idea of two become one flesh, not just physically, but this deep spiritual merging.
Like the Christ and the church comparison you sometimes hear.
Right. That analogy became central. It definitely elevated marriage beyond, managing goats and land transfers.
But the book notes it wasn't like flipping a switch,
Yeah.
right? The practical stuff didn't just vanish overnight.
Oh, absolutely not. Not at all. For centuries, the book explains things like dowries, money or goods changing hands and making strategic matches based on family status or wealth. That all continued. It ran right alongside the religious side.
So you got the strategic alliance and the blessing.
You got both.
Yeah.
And then came the next huge influence, according to the book. A cultural juggernaut, really.
Let me guess. Hollywood.
Bingo, Hollywood. The book argues that Hollywood, especially in the 20th century, just took over as the main storyteller for marriage.
And what story did it tell?
It told the story of romantic love, intense passion, finding the one, overcoming obstacles because your love is just that strong. And of course,
The happily ever after.
the guaranteed happily ever after. Movies didn't really focus on the dowries or the day-to-day compromises. It was all about the feeling.
And the book connects this directly to some problems.
Yeah, it draws a pretty clear line. It argues that by making that initial intense feeling the absolute center, the sole foundation, and the thing that's just to last forever, well, it set people up for disappointment.
Because feelings change, ebb and flow.
Exactly. Real life happens. When that initial romantic high naturally shifts or fades, which it often does over years, the book suggests couples started thinking the marriage itself had failed. Why? Because the core expectation, the Hollywood promise, wasn't being met.
They were sold a movie plot, not necessarily the reality of building a life together.
Precisely. The expectation got kind of disconnected from the actual work of partnership. So that brings us closer to today. The book really digs into what marriage has become now and flags some potential issues.
Okay, like what? What's the picture now, according to the source?
Well, one really big theme the book explores is this idea of optics, not intimacy.
Optics, meaning...
How things look.
Exactly, how things look to the outside world, especially, online. The book suggests marriage has, in many ways, become a kind of social currency, a status symbol.
The highlight reel.
The highlight reel, absolutely.
Yeah.
People share the perfect wedding shots, the flawless anniversary dinners, the golden hour kiss photos, but the everyday stuff, the arguments, the chores, the day-to-day grind, as the book calls it, that stays hidden.
Completely hidden. The argument is that it's become less about the actual lived, messy, real experience of being partners.
And more about
building a grid, curating a perfect-looking feed for everyone else to see. It's like performance art.
The book makes this really sharp point, too, comparing how some people approach marriage almost like a subscription you can just cancel.
Right. And often the same people are really quick to judge others who want to join the institution.
There's an irony there, the book points out.
Huge irony. It mentions, for example, someone who might be divorced, maybe multiple times, suddenly acting like the gatekeeper, deciding who should or shouldn't be allowed to marry, like criticizing gay marriage, for instance.
So defending an institution they haven't necessarily upheld themselves while trying to block others.
That's the inconsistency the book highlights. It really questions the logic behind that kind of gatekeeping.
And this all seems to circle back to that idea we discussed earlier, making being in love the only thing that matters.
Yes. The book argues that this might have backfired. Historically, marriage often had other pillars holding it up: duty, family, stability, practical partnership.
But now,
If that intense feeling fluctuates, the immediate thought is often, this isn't working, the marriage failed. But the book pushes back and asks, well, maybe the expectation was the flawed part. Maybe lasting partnership needs more than just a constant feeling, like commitment, shared values.
things the older models, even the business ones, understood in their own way.
Perhaps. And because of this shift towards feeling as the sole foundation, the book suggests that the sense of permanence, of marriage being truly sacred, has been diluted for some.
How so?
The idea that people might enter marriage almost planning for the exit, having an exit strategy in mind.
Wow.
The book argues this fundamentally changes things. It shifts marriage from a covenant, that deep, maybe unconditional promise, to more of a convenience, something you stick with as long as it feels good or works for you.
And that changes how you approach everything, day to day.
Completely. Now, the book doesn't shy away from controversial topics either. It wades into the discussion around gay marriage.
Okay, that's definitely sensitive ground. How does it approach it?
It approaches it by grounding the discussion in the very history we've been talking about. It basically uses the evolution of marriage itself to frame the debate.
So what's the core argument from the book's perspective?
It argues that since marriage existed for a very long time, centuries, in fact, as a practical, often non-religious arrangement.
Starting with those land deals and, yes, livestock.
Exactly. Starting way before the church got involved in formally defining and blessing it. The idea that any single religious institution owns the definition of marriage. The book suggests that's historically questionable.
Didn't the author use some funny analogies in the book for this?
Oh yeah, some quite pointed ones. It compares critics to someone showing up late to a potluck dinner and loudly insisting they invented food.
Okay, that paints a picture.
Or it suggests some critics treat marriage almost like a disposable commodity for themselves, like a drive-through meal or a phone upgrade, something they can easily discard, while simultaneously telling other committed couples they aren't worthy of entering the institution at all.
It highlights the hypocrisy, essentially.
It does, and it asks a pretty direct question. If modern marriage is so often framed around love, commitment, partnership, why should the gender of the two people involved suddenly become this huge theological barrier for others?
What's the book's take on that?
It suggests that sometimes this might be about confusing holiness with exclusivity, as if making something available to fewer people somehow makes it more special or sacred, like a private club.
Like a country club model of holiness.
That's the kind of analogy it uses. It directly challenges the notion that allowing one couple to marry somehow harms or diminishes another couple's marriage.
And the book also brings in a broader point about faith itself, doesn't it?
Yes, it emphasizes that based on many religious texts, judgment isn't really presented as a primary spiritual virtue or requirement.
It focuses more on
Compassion, inclusion, humility. It references key religious figures and their actions, suggesting they were more focused on love and understanding than on, say, policing other people's relationships. The book puts it quite bluntly. If you find yourself more upset about two people of the same sex getting married than about perhaps injustice or a lack of compassion in the world or even in your own life,
you might be missing the point.
that's the suggestion, that faith should ideally lead towards love and building community, not towards control and exclusion.
These are definitely points that offer a different lens, rooted in that historical perspective.
They certainly make you think about the stories we tell ourselves about marriage and maybe question where those stories originated.
Absolutely. And look, if these ideas are sparking something for you, if you're finding this historical journey and the book's analysis as fascinating as we are,
Then you really should check out the source itself for the full context.
to dive even deeper into the ideas we're discussing, you can find the book, The Art of Us, Bridging the Gender Divide by Xavier Ezra Borrero.
It's available online and in stores. Just visit elevatepublishingco.com or look on Amazon or Barnes & Noble to get your copy.
It really lays out these arguments in much more detail. Okay, so we've traced this incredible path marriage has taken
From practical contracts
to holy sacraments to Hollywood dreams.
and now navigating all these modern contradictions. But there's one more huge piece of the puzzle today, isn't there? Something fundamentally changing the game.
Ah, yes, the digital elephant in the room. The book talks quite a bit about marriage in the age of social media and algorithms.
It makes this really striking argument. We've kind of stopped building marriages and started branding them.
Branding them like a product.
In a way, yes. The book suggests that online, marriage often becomes more about creating content and managing optics.
Okay, explain that.
It's less about the actual day-to-day reality, the ups, the downs, the compromises, the quiet moments, and more about crafting this perfect-looking image for public view. The goal becomes having an impressive, aspirational grid or feed.
Right, the pressure to have those amazing engagement photos, the proposal video that goes viral, the super long, gushing anniversary posts that sound like movie scripts.
Exactly, all that stuff. While the real-life stuff, who's doing the dishes tonight, how are we going to pay this bill, why are you annoying me right now, that doesn't make the cut.
Because it's not good content, as the book says.
It's not glossy, it doesn't project perfection. And the book argues this creates a dangerous confusion.
Between what?
Between getting external validation likes, shares, comments, and building actual internal intimacy.
Ah, so chasing the applause online.
Instead of maybe focusing on the person right next to you. The book warns that couples can end up more tuned into their followers' reactions than their partner's actual needs or feelings. You're optimizing for the algorithm, maybe, not for the relationship.
And the algorithm itself just feeds this.
Oh, totally. The book makes a really crucial point here. Algorithms show you more of what you click on. So you see one perfect couple, you engage, and boom, your feed is flooded with curated highlight reels.
Making everyone else's relationship look effortless and amazing.
Exactly. And the book argues this sets up an impossible comparison. You start judging your own real messy, requires work marriage against somebody else's polished PR campaign.
And suddenly the normal challenges of partnership feel like signs of failure.
Spot on. The book says struggle doesn't sell online, so we don't see it. But, and this is key, the book argues that the struggle, the compromise, the forgiveness, that's where real marriage lives.
That's where the commitment, the covenant, actually shows up.
Yes. It's in those hard conversations, maybe the boring chores done side by side, the choosing each other even when it's difficult or decidedly unglamorous.
Not just the perfect selfie moment.
Right. The book warns that if we focus too much on that polished online version, we risk forgetting what real lasting love actually takes. You know, effort, patience, being vulnerable, working through stuff together. It's a strong reminder that love is work, not just vibes.
Wow. So, reflecting on this whole journey, the book maps out from ancient deals to religious meaning to romantic ideals, and now this digital pressure. It's crystal clear. Marriage has never been just one thing.
Never static, always evolving.
Yeah.
And the book suggests the real task for couples now isn't trying to perfectly copy some past model or live up to some impossible present-day ideal.
What is it then?
It's more about having the courage and the clarity to design a partnership that genuinely works for the two people involved right here, right now, focusing on alignment for them.
Which is messy, the book acknowledges that.
Yeah.
Because we're all kind of figuring out this next version together.
Absolutely. So thinking about all this, what does it mean for you, the listener? For your own understanding of marriage or relationships, the book seems to say you don't need Hollywood's fairy tale.
Oh, the weight of ancient traditions.
Or church guilt, or even Instagram's approval to define what your commitment looks like.
What you do need, the book suggests, is maybe clarity. Clarity about what you and your partner are actually building.
And commitment, real commitment to that person. And yeah, the courage to face the real stuff, the partnership, even when it isn't picture perfect.
There's a quote near the end of the book that really sums this up beautifully.
Ah, yes, let me find it. Here it is. Marriage is not the destination, but the journey of two souls choosing to walk hand in hand, weaving love, trust, and growth into a bond that transcends time, tradition, and expectations.
That's powerful. It acknowledges the effort, the weaving involved. It's not passive.
Not at all. It's active, it's ongoing.
And the book is clear. It is hard work. It doesn't sugarcoat that.
Yeah.
But it also frames that work as something potentially beautiful, maybe even sacred in its own way, something that's yours to shape.
It's a good reminder, I think, that nobody really has this all figured out perfectly. We're all just trying to learn as we go, show up for each other, and build something authentic in a world that often pushes the superficial.
A fantastic perspective to explore further.
Definitely. And if you want to really dig into these ideas and get the author's full perspective, we absolutely recommend getting the book.
One more time. That's The Art of Us. Bridging the Gender Divide by Xavier Ezra Borrero.
You can find it easily online at elevatepublishingco.com, Amazon, or Barnes & Noble. Well worth the read.
Thank you all for listening to The Art of Us, Bridging the Gender Divide. Until next time. In a world right now that's divided, let's keep building a community with unity and understanding and lead the way by being examples.